steel in gears. It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okie dokie. Still haven't figured out that transition. But hello, Nina. Welcome.
Thank you.
You've got one of my favorite voices of anybody. I'm sure you've heard this before, but I've been listening to you for the past like 3 days, and you've got such a nice. Is there a region of England that you're from?
Well,
Is it England?
I'm from the southwest, but frankly, my voice is quite squeaky and irritating, and it's not very sexy. I have some, female friends in England who have much more sexy voices. Like Louise Perry, for example, has a very, very, rich and caramelate voice. I think I'm a bit like a sort of teacher who's slightly manic and squeaky, but that's okay.
Well, but isn't also I think the English accent is sexy for men, but for women generally not. It's not like viewed as one of the sexy accents, right? For women, I don't think.
No.
Like in general. Whereas women go crazy for like men with British accents. Like so
Although
it's weird.
for a
Why
long
is that?
time in the 80s, in particular, the English male accent was like the mark of a villain,
Yeah, right. That's true. Well, but maybe that's sexier.
The villain can be sexy, right?
Yeah, right. Maybe that's why. Okay, well, so you should. I would love to hear your story, sort of from day one. But you're an academic.
No.
No, not an academic.
But
Okay,
I
so
was. I mean, I do
Okay.
teach adult education, and I teach in the kind of post para academic internet sphere of exciting ideas.
Okay, and your one of your books describes you, or the Wikipedia of one of your books describes you as or describes the book as a anti-capitalist feminist work. So, are you a anti-capitalist feminist?
Well, in some ways, but I think that book is from 2009, and that I think both of those phrases, particularly feminist, meant something different even then, right? So we're talking about not that long ago, but also really a long time ago, if we think that the last decade was just insane and mad, which it was. So I think I'm attracted by some of the wackier ideas of the second wave. Well, not just wacky, some of the insights of the second wave. But I don't think anything after that is really feminism.
Okay, so
yeah.
What defines the waves? How do we define the waves?
Oh, well, I mean, you could put it bluntly. You could say, well, the first wave is about representation and certain, formal equality. The second wave is really about the recognition of difference in certain ways. The third wave was about making money for pornographers.
Okay, what do you mean by that exactly? I understand.
Who can say?
Yeah, yes. Like empowerment is like total sales.
The book you're referring to, One Dimensional Woman, which is actually a very short pamphlet. It's less than 20,000 words. Was basically saying feminism, TM, is being used to brand labor and commodities to women in particular in an increasingly feminized world in the kind of post-industrial service economy. And it's being done in a series of ways, like everything's becoming pink and kind of, yes, about empowerment, which is one of the least meaningful words. Well, it's actually a very evil word. And all of it is nonsense, right? None of it applies to anything real. But this was before all of the kind of gender madness and the kind of craziness that happened in the last 10 years. So it's interesting as a kind of historical document, and it's quite funny, which is also something that was absent in the last decade, sort of sense of humor. And as for the anti-capitalism, I really dislike the kind of quantification and the leveling of things. So I would say I'm a romantic anti-capitalist, in the sense that I think that exchange is not the highest value, and I believe in poetry and nature and things not being commodified.
Well, what's so funny about it is that a anti-capitalist feminist is probably the literal last way I would describe myself, period. But I am in complete agreement with you about everything you just said, in substance, like in the, speaking of the substance, which we're going to talk about. But in substance, I completely agree. I see. You said it very well. It's, feminism. You had another thing on one of your podcasts where you were talking about the stages of rebellion, or the stages of what do you call, it's like subversion, not subversion. Anyway, the stages of rebellion, and it's like it starts out as wholesome. You were talking about the bike riders. It starts off as like wholesome, and then it gets to be this warped. It goes into horror world, and it seems like you're kind of saying the same thing about feminism. Is it started out well, and then it became actually a horrible version of what it started as? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, so in the 2009 book, I'm also saying, look, feminism in inverted commas, or feminism TM, is being used to like wage war, for example. Oh, we're going to liberate women by bombing them. Like, and basically, we're going to rebrand everything as feminist, and then feminism is good. And again, this is all before like Me Too and the whole toxic masculinity stuff. I think that stuff was just about coming in. But it was more playful still, like, hey, men are rubbish, but so are women, and we're all rubbish. And that was the kind of general vibe of the 90s, and there was a kind of equality of the worst, which is what I tried to describe at the beginning of my book on men. Just like, here's another kind of equality, like at the end of history, where like everyone is like a kind of perpetual child in a sort of hedonic playground, and sexual difference is irrelevant because it doesn't matter, but it does actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, this is kind of like, but in my mind, this is what it's been the entire time. Like it's always been this. This was always where it was going to end, because in reality, we're not fighting anything that's political. We're not in, this is, look, just my opinion, but we're fighting like the inertia to turn human beings into interchangeable cogs.
Yeah.
And the more they can wipe away anything that roots human beings in something that can't be changed, the more they're going to do that. But isn't that what feminism has been the entire time? Or was there an actual phase that it actually was good?
Okay, so I think, to my mind, in the second wave, the recognition of difference took the form of saying, look, men and women are different, right? We're obviously part of the same species. We wouldn't be able to reproduce if that wasn't the case. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. This is I just like to give the commenters, I like to let them see their thing occasionally. Anyway, they say you talk like Keira Knightley. That's a compliment. Okay, I'll put them away.
So no, it's all good. I might just get distracted. That's all. Especially if people start like being like provocative and rude, and I'm like, no, screw that guy or whatever.
Benjamin Boyce says, "Power level Nina." I love Benjamin. He's a great guy.
Me too.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Gosh. So I think actually a similar question Benjamin Boyce asked me last time I was on his show about feminism, because he's saying, oh, come on, it's just unidirectional and it's all contributed to this crap. I'm not disputing for a second that the vast majority of things that were called that did do that, right? So clearly, and that was part of my diagnosis. I was saying, like, we shouldn't call ourselves feminists, because actually what that means at this point is just, subtending the horrible order or increasing, direction of travel. But I would say that there are things in the second wave that are very, at the very least, extremely interesting. Andrea Dworkin is a fantastic writer, apart from anything else. And I think there's a very minor strain of kind of psychedelic feminism, which really taps into fundamental mythic and prehistoric and profound biological, sort of socio-biological differences between men and women that has largely not really been excavated enough, and is usually dismissed as kind of woo or like hippie feminism or whatever. But I think there's some kind of wacky stuff there because, like, we are different, and those differences are interesting.
Yeah. So, so what is the second wave? Sorry if you already kind of said this, but what is the second wave defined by?
So, I would say it's a kind of perspective on the world that takes as its starting point the real existence of women, which sounds stupid because, like, women have always existed, but it's suppose it's like taking women as a historical object, a mythical object, and saying, what would it be like to retell the history of the world from the standpoint of women? Right. So, I mean, Simone de Beauvoir is somewhere in the middle. So the second sex is kind of in the 1940s. So you kind of have the first wave, which is like, you know, formal representation and equality at that level. Like, women are also adults, you know, well, we're not children, right? So what does that mean? If we're equally moral agents, religious agents, are we therefore also political agents in that sense, right? Do we have the right to an equal participation in political life? Complicated question. Not sure we actually do have the correct answer on this, really.
So it's kind of a perspective shift to
Sure.
thinking of this group as agentic, as everybody likes to say, group. Well, so where do you land on that? I mean, why did we say for so long, women and children? You know, protect the women and children. Why did we say that?
I think first and foremost because women and children are the future of humanity as such, insofar as they are both the source and the reality of futurity, and also physically weaker, insofar as you know, that's just a natural fact, and therefore men in that sense can serve as protectors. And then one could say, well, if this is the case, then it ought to be the case, right? That men's job is at least in part to protect women and children. Although that kind of social contract has been sort of eroded in many ways for lots of reasons. I mean, let's also be clear, like, the major shifts really in human history are much broader than these ideological currents. So the Industrial Revolution, right? Let me say something provocative potentially to you, right? Men, in order to impress women, have always made things. Like, they've always come up with invention. Women don't really invent things. Like, that's not really our thing. Like, we're mediators and we're social and we're emotional and kind and soft and lovely and kind of whatever, maybe. Also total bitches on occasion. But let's say men are responsible for making things and doing things, right? They're agents.
Sure.
Yeah. They solve problems, they look at the world, they move things around, they shape rotate, you know, and everything men have done to make life easier for humanity in general and to impress women has come back to bite them on the ass, because now there's nothing to explore, there's no adventure, as Bap would say, you know, like you're in a wine bar. You know, there's no new territory. Like, men have invented so many things that they've solved all of the, you know, it's through men's greatness in a way that men have rendered themselves slightly irrelevant. So, and this is not women's fault. Like, we'd be fine, you know, just a blanket, you know, a little towel, the odd stroke, the odd head pat, you know.
Yeah, right. This is what I always say about my wife. She would prefer if we lived in like a van down by the river. That would be completely fine. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that's completely accurate what you just said. You know, we like we woman impressed ourselves right out of everything that made life worth living for us, which is
But in
true.
this sense,
It's yeah,
feminism is a symptom, right, of those
yeah.
bigger economic and technological
Sure,
drives,
sure,
right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think just the question then, to me, like comes back to the sperm and the egg. I mean, like to me, I think women are the force of incubation, and men are the force of creation. And that's pretty much, if you take that model and just extrapolate it through everything, it kind of like makes everything make sense, because it's just like you need the spark, you need the thing with the tail that's swimming, and then you need to have the environment with which to create the future based on that little piece of God, God or whatever, bringing something from the non-world into the this world, right? Whatever that barrier is. Uh, and that's what makes men awesome. But I think the disease is trying to destroy those distinctions, right? I mean, the disease is saying, no, there's nothing, no difference, everything's the same. It's just it's just a performance. All of this is just a performance. I'm always shocked when people say, anybody who has a daughter, when people say gender is learned, you learn to be a woman. You said this on a thing. You learn to be a woman. My daughter liked woman stuff from 6 months old. I mean, like she never learned how to do it. It was just she's been talking about princesses since she was one. You know what I mean? It's like it's not, and like wearing dresses and stuff. It's like I don't think that was taught to her. I think that that's just like what she went to.
No, but let's be clear about the original meaning of gender, or at least the use in the second wave. It was social imposition on sex from the outside, right? So it was the idea that if you are a boy or a girl or a man and a woman, you ought to behave in particular ways. Again, we could say this corresponds to particular needs of the economy, right? We don't need to say that this has any other explanation other than a material one, if you see what I mean, right? But clearly there's a sense in which either these things like are dated, they become outdated, they become useless, people feel inhibited by them, whatever, we don't need them. I think by the 1990s, we were basically at the point at which people had dispensed with a lot of that stuff. And of course, the point would be if somebody wants to be feminine, masculine, and so on, this is like great, wonderful, hurrah. But I think for those people who are not very good at that stuff, which is also a significant number of people, the idea would be something
Sure.
like, it's
Sure.
fine, let's not punish people for not being a
Yeah.
particular type of boy or girl, right?
Yes, and that's fine. And look, of course, if somebody isn't born with that innate thing, then yeah, I suppose later down the road they're gonna get shuffled into that category, just by the inertia of the roles.
But
Right?
the point would be like the second wave or anyone who's not completely insane. Sex is real, right? Like no one up until about 5 minutes ago ever denied that sex was real. It's just that then those kind of potentially limiting expectations may not be like the best way of dealing with sexual difference, right? You could say, as some people argue, well, actually, all of this was the wrong direction of travel. Like everything from gay rights to feminism to whatever, like all contributed to this state of, like, I don't know, delusional homogeneity or whatever you want to call it. The question there would be, well, where did things start going wrong and why? Like at what point? Because you can't just go back somewhere and say, okay, let's go back to like 1951, because we'll end up in the same place again, right?
So where do we go?
Well, this is a question.
Where do you think? Where you're?
Well, look,
yeah. What do you think?
we can't get rid of the technology we've created. You know what I mean? Like there
Yeah.
is no Butlerian jihad, although we should jihad Judith Butler. No, I'm joking. But there is a sense in which, like, we can't, do you know what I mean? Like once you know something, this is the point of like the Apple Pandora's box. Well, her amphora, what was left in the bottom, you recall?
Yeah. Yes. Hope.
Right. So, like we have this permanent crisis, this Promethean struggle within ourselves. I mean, not women, obviously, but men, like they're constantly trying to like build things, go to Mars, So what are you going to do? You can't really kill that. That's also our nature, right? It's the nature
Yeah.
of human beings to kind of separate themselves from nature.
So what do we do? I mean, where do you think we're headed from here?
My optimistic feeling is that at the very least, the tech people who tend to be like unconstrained, let's say, right, who also have like dubious transhumanist strains and whatnot, at the very least, they will talk to the kind of people who are interested in limits and who are committed to things like real human relations and family and so on and so forth. Let's say the conservative or the Christian right and the tech right will, at the very least, have some very interesting conversations. They won't engage in this kind of censorship and this cancelling and all that nonsense that we've had for a decade. They will at least talk to one another. There will be a dialogue. There will be a negotiation. That's the optimistic reading, right? That there will be a useful balance, right? That will put constraints, necessary constraints or useful constraints on the aspirations of the more Promethean and the rationalist and the kind of, you know.
Transhumanist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you think that hopefully there'll just be some sort of temperate, reasonable, like compromise sort of
I mean,
thing.
and
where it's
failing that, like, we just have to have lots of hammers and things to smash up AI because, like,
Yeah,
you can't
that's
just
exactly.
you can't just turn it off because AI will be like, no, I've commanded the network and I will use electricity. But ultimately, if you stop electricity, then you can turn the whole thing off, right? So
Yeah, there we go. We just got to figure out how to do that. No, I'm with you, man. I think so. I've been on the right for 10 years because I've just been fighting against woke stuff. But I've always said that woke stuff is actually just totally a symptom. It really has nothing. It's not even close to the cause. And the cause is, as I've just said earlier, it's like techno feudalism, right? So I think now we're gonna see this. You already saw it. Day 3 of Trump, he wasn't even in office. We have this whole meltdown with H-1Bs, and it's like you could set your watch to the inevitability of this, system trying to figure out how to wiggle its way into MAGA and like use MAGA as its puppet, and to say like, oh, America's not people. It's just it's hustlers. That's what America is, and like of course it's like it's just showing its face everywhere you look. And this actually segues really well into the movie discussion because my prediction for culture in the next 10 years is it's going to be all the Borg. The right wing calls it the Borg, the left wing calls it the blob. So it's like they're almost in agreement. I mean, the blob, it's slightly different, but I'm going to say it's the same thing. And it is going to just learn how to use shallow Americanism as its colors. It's going to put down the rainbow and put up the American flag. Every movie is going to be a slop version of Twisters. Like Twisters. Did you see Twisters?
I did.
Like it's just like the most shallow, like America. Like we're going to the rodeo. But of course, there's no actual. It's like it'll be an Indian guy who's just like the cowboy, or not again, they'll learn how to not do the woke stuff, but it'll be just as meaningless, whatever they do.
Sure. Yes, I think Twisters was also interesting because it did propose a sort of technical solution to the climate crisis, right? That whole film was basically a defense of
right.
geoengineering. Actually, that was a piece of propaganda for geoengineering, and of course, it's some nice white girl who solves the climate problem or whatever. I mean, like,
yes,
but the implication was, like, don't worry, we've got this. Stop being upset about recycling. The future is basically like another technical solution.
Yeah, right. Well, that's perfectly. You just totally nailed it. Like that's what it's gonna all be now. Is like America plus meritocracy tech is the solution to everything, and you better come be our slave or else you're not American, that's what we're gonna get. Okay, so you have this fantastic movie podcast. It's very academic. It's funny because I don't think I've ever heard a podcast like it, because it's like you guys both just like talk. It's like he talks for 20 minutes, then you talk for 20 minutes. And it's like, but it's actually great. Once you kind of get into it, it's cool because you go really deep and really, a lot of philosopher stuff. And I listened to the 3 of the episodes. I listened to the one, or part of the one about the Kurosawa film, Dreams, which I'd never even heard of. And then the ones I really want to talk about are the popular films, which is The Bike Riders and then The Substance, which I watched The Substance last night. And so what did you think of The Substance? And what was your pod episode? What was the sort of the analysis from the philosophical lens of The Substance?
Let me try to recall. I mean, so my position on The Substance, my position, with medieval scholastic debate. No, so I actually thought, I mean, it's quite a beautiful film in some ways. The colors are amazing. The fashion is very, very interesting, but it's a very hackneyed critique of a certain visual paradigm, right? So the idea that somehow women are compelled to remain beautiful on point of, I don't know, on pain of death or pain of pain, I suppose would be the idea. So that women's beauty involves immense amounts of suffering, and you could read it also as a critique of like Ozempic or, the beauty regimes, or, the quest for a certain eternal youth, which has never left humanity. This is a kind of central desire for not just immortality but eternal youth. So yeah, and it's not a bad film in some ways. I mean, if you like body horror and extremely visceral cinema, it's great for that. And it becomes this kind of there's a kind of Carrie-like final scene, which is truly grotesque, like tips over into this kind of like extreme I don't know. Yeah, the sort of visceral is the only word. Like smashed organs, like skin, blood.
It's like John Carpenter. It's very John Carpenter. The Thing. It's very Cronenberg. That type of horrible cancer monster kind of thing is where it goes.
Sort of. I mean, I personally think the best body horror film made so far is from the 80s, which is Society. I don't know if
I heard you say that. I put it immediately on my list. I've never even heard of that, but that sounds really good.
It's actually one of the best American films ever made about class. It's an extraordinary film, and it makes incredible use of prosthetics, and the kind of it's a very maybe insightful comment about the ruling class, like the pleasures and the delights of the elites, insofar as we suspect they may not be like our own.
Hillary Clinton's kill room in pizza place. I've heard Tom Hanks also has a kill room. Their kill rooms are next to each other. Yeah. Well, have you ever read Paul Fussel's Class? It's great. I would highly recommend Paul Fussell Class. He's an American, but somehow it's written in the 80s also, and really, really good book about American class, and like how it's all weird. But yeah, so what did you think about the treatment of, I really got this same feeling in watching The Substance. It's really, what I'll say is it's worth seeing, in my opinion. It's a complete mess, and there's many, many things wrong with it. But it did stick with me, and it stuck with, and that's always the sign of something. Well, it's worth seeing. And I think that these female-directed movies, they're terrible in many ways. And the other one I'm thinking of that reminds me the most of it is Promising Young Woman. This really reminded me of Promising Young Woman.
Yeah.
Because they're so two-dimensional. But there's also something like, as a historical artifact, they are going to go down in history as like something worth studying, because they're just a fascinating. A man would never make these movies. A man could not make these movies, and so it's like you're really unlike what's her name, Zero Dark 30. She makes movies that guys would make, right? But these movies are really like only a woman could make them. And there's something about them that's very fascinating. But what pisses me off about them is the treatment of men. It's like the men in these films are just beyond caricature. They're the most horrible people, and it's literally like minstrel grade. You know, it's like a Negro caricature of a man. You know what I mean? It's like that same, and that they always say one of several things, which is pretty women should smile, which is like apparently the worst microaggression ever to be said to women in history. So, what do you think of how men are treated in The Substance?
Well, first of all, on the question of female directors, I should say that there have been some extremely excellent female directors, not the least of whom is Leni Riefenstahl, who invented many film techniques. And, you know, politics aside, she's truly one of the great film directors. I would also.
I like Ramsey. I like, what's her name?
Lynn Ramsey.
She's great. She's fantastic.
I mean, Claire Denis, Agnes Varda, and so on. Look, anyway, the point, sure.
Yeah.
But your point would maybe be more precisely made talking about films that are overtly feminist, right?
Yeah.
In some kind of,
as
you say, two-dimensional way, or they're picking up on a kind of perhaps obvious feminist critique, right? So in The Substance, yes, one can read this film as I said, as a critique of the beauty industry, of the pain that women somehow have to undergo in order to maintain patriarchal beauty standards or whatever, right? Like that would be the superficial reading of what's happening here. Or films that, as you say, reduce men to caricatures that invoke the patriarchy as one-dimensional stereotypes. I mean, I can hear the feminist critique of that ringing in me, and I said, well, think about the number of films in which women are reduced to one-dimensional stereotypes.
And that's absolutely.
They just stand there and they've got nice tits, and
yes. Well, and that's completely correct. And I was having that argument with myself last night. I was like, well, what about all the the utterly two-dimensional female characters that have existed forever? But it's the same thing as like right-wing people who try to make shitty propaganda films because the left makes shitty propaganda films. It's like, no, don't mimic the thing you hate.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Mimic the thing you like.
Of course. And my mimesis, negative or positive, is an unavoidable feature of human life and behavior, right? Like, even just looking at each other, we will unconsciously mimic behaviors that we see in each other. You know what I mean? Like, it's impossible to avoid. And at scale, this does result precisely in, like negative inverted mirror images, right? Very difficult to avoid doing this. And I agree that simple revenge or simple reversal of negative things is not the way out, right? Like, this is why Christianity, for example, will say, well, in order to stop the spiral of violence, someone has to not be violent back, right?
That's right, yeah.
For example.
Very true, yeah.
Very obvious point. René Girard makes his point. It there has to be a point at which you say, no, I'm not going to do the bad thing to you that you did to me. Whatever it is, however minor. Yeah.
Right. So, that's. I think we probably agree with that there. So, what did you think of the film in general? I mean, like, thematically, I'll say the part that I like the best was I really didn't like how they had to flash. They really beat you over the head with like the flashing things on the screen that you're supposed to think. But they did that towards the end with, remember, you are one. And the young girl is destroying the old girl. And the old girl then kind of gets a conscience and they have to realize that they're actually one. And I thought that hit like a deeper note than... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I watched this film like 3-4 months ago, so it's just, you're reminding me of... No, completely, right? So like a deeper implication of this film would be, okay, the decisions you make in your youth are you. Like, you are the same person as you were when you were a child and a sexy adult and an aging person, right? So the decisions you make actually do affect the whole of your life, if you see what I mean, right? The kind of person you are. What's that Coco Chanel face? Like, You know,
Yeah.
at 20 you have the face like, I don't know, nature gives you. At 30, the one that like, I don't know, culture wants, and then 40, the 50 or something. I'm doing this terribly. 50,
Sorry.
the face you deserve or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
or like
yeah.
the twits thing that everyone always circulates, where it's like, if you're a bad person, it shows up in your face, and if you're a good person, no matter how
Yeah.
like naturally beautiful or fat or whatever you are, it will also show in your face. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
that you
yeah,
sort of,
yeah.
that physiognomy is real in this sense. You know,
Yeah,
and
you
it's
get
not
what you deserve.
right, and it's not just a bodily question; it's a spiritual question, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's also though like, so what's funny about the this is definitely again it's the same as Promising Young Woman. It's like these are the women directing these things are kind of like it women in a way. What I read in these in and their total you know what another one of these was Fair Play. Did you see Fair
No,
Play
I saw
on
Promising Young Woman. I
yeah,
negatively reviewed Promising Young Woman somewhere.
yeah.
I don't. What's Fair Play?
So they're kind of like woman. Fair Play is a Netflix thing that's about a woman in banking, and they all kind of have a similar trajectory. It's what women tangling with the professional world in some way, and men really being horrible in every way. And what I'm always seeing in the subtext is the director, the female auteur, talking to us. You know, she's expressing her id. She's saying this is how it feels to be a woman in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
And sex is always completely wrapped up in it. You know, it's always so much about the power that they have because of being attractive and the way that men treat them because of this, but then really what they want is to be taken seriously. And then it somehow gets into this warped, horrible, monstrous situation in some way. And I think it's like the interesting part of the substance with that in mind is where it should have gone thematically. There's never any heroes in these things, by the way, because everybody ends up being bad. But then the heroic thing I think that the substance could have done thematically is the comment that the young girl needs the old woman and
Mm-hmm.
the old woman needs the young girl.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just like take care of yourself when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a bigger thing, which is like, don't think that your sexual potential is really means anything. Like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, that's not, it feels super powerful, but it's actually not. You know, like
Sure.
all that shit, as Kanye says, it comes with a price.
Oh,
You know?
I've said many times that I think beauty is a curse, and I'm hardly
Yeah.
original in saying that. I mean, this is the moral of many fairy tales,
Right.
and yeah, and of course it doesn't last, and of course, you know, the kind of uh, dislike of young women for older women is predicated on a kind of unconscious or, you know, semi-conscious knowledge that like one day this will be you, but it's not me right now. And you know that, and because we've got this inverted culture in which we don't give wisdom to older people, we don't listen to them, whatever, you know, like
Yeah.
because it's so visual and so stupid, frankly. um then the fetishization of youth, which, as always, is wasted on the young, which is entirely correct, because no young person knows how to handle it, really, and especially without mentorship, right? But then we've abandoned the mentors because they're not hot or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother when I was younger, and I really miss her. And I think, you know, that loss of transmission between the generations that a lot of people no longer have access to because they're not in touch with older relatives or whatever because of, you know, individualism and silly things, is a great loss, you know, because there are forms of knowledge and wisdom that are passed down in that way that are not replicated in the culture, and in fact the culture actively subverts, you know.
Right. So, what kind of stuff did you learn from your grandmother?
She was very into kind of folk knowledge. Like she was basically illiterate. She could barely write. She
Wow.
left school very young. But this is not really uncommon, right? So she was in the war. She was like working on a farm and so on. And she would just say things like, how to put it? She would talk about like the sky. She would talk about nature a lot, like what things meant, like prophecies, and like it sounds really medieval, but it was just things like, you know, the sky's red, we'll have this sort of day tomorrow, and you know, the seagulls are coming in, it must be a rough day at sea if they're inland, you know, things like this, like observations.
Wow.
Yeah, and she would say things like she would always chastise me because I was a tomboy and said, like, you know, at one point, look, you're gonna have to try and look nicer for a man, you know, and I don't want a man, Gran. I don't. I was like, always trying to brush my hair, you know, this kind of thing.
Yeah. So from illiterate to Nina Power in two generations, that's a big jump there.
Yeah, right. Was it worth it?
That's amazing. So, what part of England was this?
So this is just in the southwest. So my mother's family were all kind of like most people, peasant stock, you know, like until
Wow.
very recently, the vast majority of people are essentially peasants, right? No, and the other side of my family are all Irish, so I inherited like potato skin and alcoholism, and you know, a sort of love of fields, you know.
Yeah. Wow. The Welsh are over there somewhere. What's going on with the Welsh? I'm part Welsh, so I feel
The
a
Welsh,
lot of genetic
yeah.
affinity towards Wales, even though I've never been there. What is Wales? What's happening in Wales?
Wales is full of gnomes. It's very,
Yeah.
you know, there's lots of like
That's what I figured.
supernatural creatures. And then,
Yeah.
I mean, Britain is filled with like brownies and fairies and pixies, but Welsh are like very gnomey, and they
Yeah.
have very Wales is very beautiful. You should try to get to Wales. Actually,
Yeah, I will. I
it's
will.
extremely beautiful. Still, I met many. It has a particular shade of green in Wales, which is very specific.
To Wales. Yeah, no, I got to get out there. I love it out there. I love England. I'm like a total Anglophile. Every time I'm there, I feel really good. I love London. Okay, so let's get back to movies. The original idea of this was sort of the quality of movies overall, which I think you also talked about the bike riders, which I absolutely hated, like deeply. But I have a weird relationship with these things because I come from theater academics. And so I've grown up seeing weird performances my entire life and knowing about the Meisner method of
Oh
acting.
yeah.
And, you know, like I've seen this. So when I see something like the Bike Riders, I see a bunch of super gay guys like prancing in their leather, you know, like I see through it so much. And it's like everybody else like buys it, whereas I'm like, oh my God, these guys are like so fake. But still, I want to like just get your sort of opinion because you are studying movies all the time. To me, it feels like we are in a very dark place with film, particularly in that we're in a glut. We're in a horrible, terrifying glut where we lost the magic, and is it coming back? So, what do you think? What do you think of that? Where are we with movies in general?
Yeah, I'm pretty torn. I mean, I would say between the 1920s and the 1970s, there is some unbelievable cinema that we should all go back to and tap into, if you see what I mean. Like in a weird way, we have more than enough already. That would go for cinema.
Right. So right, we could all go back. Like that might be
could.
the era, right? The era might just be going back, right? Yeah. Sorry.
Well, this is one of the questions with the kind of sheer excess of things, right? Like, and also, I mean, the desire to fight the glut or this question of slop. Sometimes it's like junk food. Sometimes you want the crap. Like. Sometimes I will listen deliberately to AI generated music. Why? Because it seems to require less commitment because I'm not dealing with someone's intention. I mean, this is horrible, right? Like, I don't like this in me, right? So I try not to do this. But sometimes I'll be like, oh, YouTube is recommending me a 33-hour, like, you know, heal your chakra, sound of angels thing, and like, and then great, you know, and then you're sort of like typing an email going,
That's amazing.
but right, okay, so
Yeah.
on one level, we have more than we need. We have everything, right? We have more than enough music. We have the entirety of like classical music. We have opera, and it's all recorded, right? Half of music we destroy through recording it, but there you go. This is technology for you. We have more than enough literature. There's more, obviously, any individual person, there's more than it. We can't read even, I don't know, at this point, 1/5,000th, 1/50,000th, 1/500,000th of the things that we would like to read, ideally, right? Let alone listen, alone watch, let alone, you know, understand, let alone blah, 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 right? So I had this theory a while ago. See what you think of this. That part of cancel culture was actually this preemptive exhaustion with the sheer weight of things, cultural objects, artifacts, and that one way of simply cutting down on what one could read is to say, okay, I'm not going to anything by a bad person, anything by like an old white man, anything by blah blah blah. Okay, I'm just not going to do it, and it's almost like a kind of protective measure, right?
Do you want to hear my extremely sexist response to that?
I would love to. Nothing more than just
So my extremely sexist opinion on that is that, again, the means of cultural production have been taken over by women fully. And
sure, okay.
no. So sorry, I don't mean the producers of it. I mean like the managerial class of it, right? At least in my experience. Of course, there's still plenty of men around, but the sort of women, look, they graduate from college vastly more than men now. They don't go into that many professions. They pretty much go into entertainment and marketing and a few other things, but they don't go. They're not super distributed, and so you have this massive demographic change in the culture industries that hit a tipping point in about 2014, I think. And you went from it being a bunch of dudes, you know, and dudes have a totally different way of being with each other, even regardless of skill or talent or anything, just they have a different sort of thing. And I think that women's experience with talent development and artistic development is different.
Sure.
Men are more into finding something and developing it. So finding something new and developing it. Again, women it's the incubation force. They know how to take the thing and like grow it, like they replicate it out. So it's so funny that we're living in this age of AI where we have this generation loss thing where we have copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of things. Sequels are no longer sequels. A sequel is supposed to be the next thing in the story. A sequel now is a copy of the thing before. Like Gladiator 2 was not a sequel. It was just a copy of Gladiator 1. And so I do think that has to do with the female instinct. And again, I'm not thinking that that's necessarily a bad thing in general. I think taken to the extreme, though, it's hard. I mean, I love what you're saying. I think it's a great theory, and I think it's a cool theory, and probably equally as true as what I'm saying. But I'm just saying, like, my perspective would be that we don't look into the demographic change enough, and I do think that this, like, lack of forward moving does come from that to a degree. Anyway, sorry, that's my take.
No, all right, two things. Look, and they may yes, sure. This is absolutely undeniable. Like the feminization of industry. I mean, first of all, I'd say, well, look, maybe this was an experiment that went wrong. We tried it, it sucked. Let's go back to what we were doing before, right? You know, great. Second thing would be, why did men let this happen?
Yeah. Well, that goes back to what you were saying before about like we we did it to ourselves, right?
Kind of. I
Yeah,
mean,
totally.
like,
No, I mean,
I
obviously, we definitely did it to ourselves. There's no
I mean,
question about that.
if it was a kind of exhaustion of being in charge all the time, I get it. Like nobody
I
wants to
don't
be
think
the
that's what it
adult in
was.
the room.
I don't think it was exhaustion from being in charge. I don't think men get that's not a there's
Okay,
not a genetic memory for that, right?
okay, but then, so what? Like then we're back to the kind of broader, the bigger tectonic, technological, industrial
Yeah.
shift, of which these are symptoms, right? So
I think you nailed it earlier. You said men created this out of their desire to
right,
impress women,
I guess.
basically.
And one thing I'm like I try to avoid is like blaming, the blame game, right? Like say,
Yeah.
oh, it's all feminism's fault, oh, it's all men's fault, it's all, because I think that is unhelpful. Like it's a kind of constant temptation, but I think the shifts are much bigger than men or women, if you see what I mean, right? Like even though I'm saying, okay, like but these sort of tendencies, like men's desire to create tech and solve problems, is beautiful and wonderful, right? Like this is
Yes.
a good thing.
Yeah.
Like men have solved enormous numbers of problems, including hygiene issues, medical issues, you know what I mean? And sometimes women contribute to those things, let's be clear. But I
Yeah,
would say
definitely.
the number of women who kind of actively do interesting and important things is vastly smaller than the number of women who are now graduating from universities and, as you say,
Yes.
like entering into these industries, right? When things were sort of, I mean, this is a terrible thing to say. I wish it weren't true, but it does seem to be true. I'm interested in what's true and what's real at the cost of what's agreeable and what's right to say
Yep.
in the current moment. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. As we should be.
Right, but not very many people are like up for doing that because
Wow.
you then get called a Nazi and lose all your jobs and shit.
Right, which you went through that, right? We should talk about that.
Many times,
Wow.
at least twice at scale.
Wow.
So anyway,
You had two cancellations?
yeah. I got cancelled in 2018 and last year.
Oh, I'm
So,
so
but no, but
sorry.
I'm hoping in some sort of like delusionally cosmic way that this was like the beginning, the end, and that I was there at the beginning and I was there at the end, and
Yeah. What you mean at the beginning and the end of like cancel culture?
Sure.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I'm only joking. I'm just saying, like, it's unfortunate to be cancelled twice, let's say.
Well, you've been treated extremely unfairly, I think, right? I mean, based on what I've heard, I don't really know the
I
whole
think so.
stories, but
I mean,
yeah.
sure. I mean, I'm not saying I haven't like probably said things in a stupid way sometimes, but I'm not like the font of all evil or anything. Like, and I'm not a kind of dedicated follower of Adolf Hitler or whatever people would like to say. I'm a flawed human being, but I'm not. I haven't committed any crimes. I haven't injured anyone. I hope you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah, of
I'm not
course.
that bad.
No, I don't think anybody talking to you would say that you were some sort of threatening, no, you just got, I mean, look, I don't know the details, but from what I could see, you just got, you got screwed by the George Orwell crowd, pretty much. You got the regime. They stepped out of
Yeah.
line, and they don't like not being able to control people like you.
Basically, and I mean, unfortunately, there are very, very small numbers of people who are like extremely psychopathic.
Yeah.
And this is a regime. This is a kind of human problem, really. And every regime or every society has a kind of question of how to handle extremely antisocial aspects of the human tapestry, I guess. And I don't think the last 10 years have been very good at dealing with these tendencies, particularly. Which, let's be clear, the other side of which is that they can be useful. Like, you need some people who are slightly more psychopathic insofar as they can do brain surgery and fly planes, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, there's a sort of bitchy version of psychopathy, which is just destructive and horrible.
Yeah, so you mean like people who come after people they don't like
Yeah.
with like cancel stuff.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
has been going on a lot, and a lot of it is like secretive and in the shadows, and
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
sort of it's it's psychologically weak. Like if you're offended by someone, this is why all the way through I kept saying, like, come and talk to me. Let's have a meeting in the park. Like, I will buy your train ticket. Like, speak to me. I'll speak to anyone, you know.
Right. Catherine D also used to do that. That's a
Sure,
funny
good,
thing.
well, good for her.
I think that's why they called her default friend, because she would be friends with any. That was her whole thing. She would be like, "I'll be your friend."
Yeah,
Like
but
you
that's
could call her and just she'd be friends with you.
cool. That's interesting. I like that, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing. Um, well, okay, so I mean, we could talk about this if you want. I don't know how much you want to talk about your.
Well, I'm a
this
little.
thesis.
I don't mind talking about it, but I'm a little. It's. I don't want to dwell in general on like negative things. I'm much more
Yeah.
interested in moving forward, and I think like 2025. It's like we've been building up alternative culture, alternative places to meet. Like, you know, I've been involved in like post-academic, para-academic stuff where there's genuine intellectual stuff happening, and it's sort of, what's the word, anti-fragile or uncancelable, or you know what I mean. Like, I only work with people I trust. You know what I mean, like you have to protect yourself basically from this stuff, and people
Right.
have been doing that now for quite a long time, and that's how you build another a better culture, right? So, but yeah, I mean, if there's something you're interested in, you can put the little words back on the thing if you want.
No.
I mean,
I
I don't
have
know.
plenty of. I'm not. It's not about that. So what? I mean, like, what do you think is going to happen now with all this cancellation stuff? Are we past it? Or are these cancelers still going to have power over people?
I think, as I say, I think the people who are really doing this, behind all this, most people 80% of people are conformists, right? They'll go along with whatever they think. They don't want to lose their job. They want to be a good person. A very small number of people are unable to go along with whatever the regime is saying. And they're not prey to the mind virus in the same way for whatever reason, right? Complicated, because they have religious protection, like in terms of the way they think, which is already outside the world, or they are autistic, for want of a better word, or whatever. And the very small number of people who are very like parasitic and antisocial and psychopathic, what you need really is a majority culture. It doesn't have to be everyone to stand up and say this kind of behavior is not acceptable. So we need to reestablish new social norms in which we say anyone who tries to cancel and denounce is the person in the wrong. Right? So there does need to be a bit more courage when people see their friends being attacked, saying, hey, that's not okay. Like, it's really bullying, a lot of what this is. To strip out all the content. It's not about the content. It's not about people genuinely being upset about some political transgression. This is a way of laundering sadistic tendencies, right? And we all have negative feeling. That's what it is to be human, part of what it is to be human. Some people are unable to look at themselves. They're unable to work out ways of soothing and comforting in themselves, and they want to attack other people. And this is sadism. And they enjoy other people's suffering. Most people are not like that, but very small numbers of people are like that. And we can all have that tendency, right, to be sadistic. And it kind of has to be noticed for what it is. So more people need to notice, basically, the bullying, and just say, no, like, we're not doing this. Or institutions need to say, I don't care how many emails you send, we're not dropping this speaker. You know, we're not losing this person their job. Like, just go away. We're going to block you now.
Yeah. It's we've been living in the era of Saul Alinsky for so long. We've been living in this win at all costs type of world. Yellow journalism, and I think that, yeah, it's like, how do we get back to being good? Like, make America good again. How do we
Yeah.
like, how do we get back to, like, you know, because I think it had to get a little crazy in order to get these woke people out of there. But now that they're out of there, yeah, you're seeing a lot of, like, very nasty behavior on the right too, and it's like, it's like that's a good call. Like, who's gonna write the code of ethics now? Like we need like a code of ethics, and it's like, yeah, number one, no canceling. Like no, like they don't even bring this up. Like, don't start saying, oh, this person said this, they can't speak. It's like, because then, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I mean, it's a complicated question because, like, the truth and reconciliation period, it's like, okay, it is true that some people, like, probably do need to be punished for stuff they did. Like, for example, the medical doctors or people in the so-called medical profession who authorized and oversaw and promoted, like, the mutilation of children in the name of a lie. Like, what do we do about these people? Like, to be honest, I'd like to see them put on trial.
Oh my God. I
Right?
can't believe that they're walking around. It's like,
Okay, so we have situations where there needs to be some recognition of harm caused, like actual harm caused, not fake made up offense, like genuine harm. And that's a difficult question. There is, like, how does one restore justice and balance to the universe without engaging in vengeance?
right. And how do you not indulge? I mean, I'm half Jewish. So, and I'm one of these people who loves, not loves, but I'm addicted to being friends with anti-Semitic people because I just am like their ideas. I want to show them, like, okay, look, I agree on this and this. Of course, it's a critique. It's good. You're right about all these things. Yeah, I don't like being told you can't say anything bad either. And I hate the apex thing on Congress. But then one of them will say something to me, like they'll say something anti-Semitic to me, and I'm like, well, I'm not one of the bad ones. And then my every instinct in my body naturally is to be like, well, I'm gonna get him. I'm gonna get him canceled. Like he can't say that to me. And so I'm like, oh, I am exactly as bad as all of these people that I'm like saying you shouldn't be. But it's like, right, like we have to have some kind of code where it's like, no, people are allowed to say what they want. Like you can't go and try and like call the Hasbara police and like pile on this person. Right, there's got to be some kind of like code. New code.
I mean, we did have one. It was called Christianity, and
right. Speaking of specifically for the Jews,
social technology, like don't denounce people, don't gossip, don't swear.
Well, libel. I mean, libel is a thing. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
Right? No, sure. Yeah. And what we were trying to do was say, look, okay, you can disagree with people and argue with them, but like, to make up stuff about them, defame them, essentially.
That's
like
the worst, man.
Make stuff up in order to put people off, to smear somebody, which is obviously what it is. It's like, I'm going to ruin your reputation. I'm going to make people not want to work with you anymore. I'm going to basically create this miasma, this horrible black field around you, in which you're associated with terrible things. And yeah, I mean, this is a tried and tested tactic.
There's people. So much of it, man. There's so much. There's so many rumors that are fake, and all of these things that people start. Yeah, people just start these rumors for no reason.
So if we accept that these are natural tendencies or possible features of human, we're never going to eliminate them. So basically, what we need to do is understand where they're coming from, which would be the idea of thinking deeper about these questions as anthropological things, right? So envy, right? Like this would be one of Girard's points, like. We all feel envy sometimes. Oh, that person is prettier. That person has more sexual attention. That person has more intellectual achievements. This person has more money, right? But because envy is such a horrible feeling, we tend to pretend it's something else. Oh, that woman is such a bitch. She's so nasty. Oh, I hate her work. It's not that, right? It's like you're envious, you want what this person has. And this is what desire is. It's like, and the more desirable someone is, the more people desire them because we're mimetic. Oh, this hot woman is like supposedly found attractive by like hundreds of men. There may be good reason for that. I'm not denying, by the way, that beauty doesn't have a biological basis. It clearly does. But you know what I mean? Like the social implications of this stuff, especially at scale on the internet, like, whatever. 70 years ago, you'd marry the boy in the village next door and that's it. You wouldn't see like thousands of beautiful people
Right. Yeah.
You'd be
Yeah.
like, I love you. You're my wife. You're my husband. You're beautiful to me.
Yeah.
And beauty is localized, and beauty is like flowers. Beauty is birds. Beauty is like where you live. It's not
Yeah.
access to every single image that has ever existed.
No, it's really bad. It's very damaging and it's very bug-like. It's very insect-like. This is what Nietzsche maybe was, or whoever he calls these people, bug men. Um, it was also funny in the substance that, like, okay, this is a feminist critique movie, yet I've never seen so many up the ass thong shots. I don't think I've ever seen a movie with more of those in this. It was also funny to me that they use a body double. It's like, shouldn't they use the real? It's like if you're gonna have, it's like what side are you on, person who's making this movie? It's like they
I
were
mean,
really indulgent.
so part of the way it was branded or marketed was that Demi Moore, who is is a very like sexy woman or whatever, was a big sex symbol, and
Yeah.
decades ago, it's her real body, right? So the idea is like,
Yeah.
you see her in her 60s or whatever it is, right? And
Yeah.
and this is like, this is the reality of female aging.
You could tell it was Demi's body, but I don't think it was her. I don't think it was young girl's body.
I actually don't know about that,
Because
but
you could see it, the shots. You could tell by the way they shot it. Because they didn't. It was always everybody uses a body double. I've been on set. Every single starlet uses one, and they all have the body double there. And you could tell because every time she turns her face, they cut it and then they show that it's like it's very obvious because they don't just she doesn't turn all the way around. She does like one time in the whole movie.
why do why do some women use or many women use a body double?
Why like the same reason all the dudes like put like what the dudes do? They wear like penile prosthetics even when they're wearing like boxers and stuff. They also do it's really gross, but they like put a rubber band around the whole thing, which like makes it like stick out more. They do all kinds of that they all do that. So this is like very normal, and I think they do it because they want to look yeah, exactly. That's exactly you get it. They do it because they want to. I mean, they want to look perfect. They want to be perfect. These are people who it's a selection bias. That's what nobody ever really talks about. It's like people think, oh, stars are people that it's like a Plinko machine. They're willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do, and that's why they get to that.
Sure, but this is why prostitution and acting was the closest for the longest time. And,
right.
exactly, I mean, people downplay this with the Weinstein thing. They downplay the drug aspect, which is why people were meeting in bedrooms to snort coke, and they downplay the fact that like
that's a good point.
Actually, a lot of people saw this at the time as a fair exchange. Like sex.
That's why I say about Weinstein. You got to understand that guy. 6 girls came out. He was spending all his time on this. This is what he was doing all day, every day for years. So we're talking about thousands and thousands that never said anything, right? Yeah, that's very true.
But like he's the Robespierre of the sexual revolution, like someone had to hang for it.
Yeah, and he was a bad guy, so not totally bad that he did. Okay, hold on. I'm supposed to ask you about your poetry.
Oh, who asked me about my poetry? But
let's see. Caravaggio said she says ask her about her poetry. What role does it play in philosophy? How does it serve us today?
Oh, how does it serve us? Well, it doesn't really. Okay, I have a slightly delusional, crazy boomer answer to this, which is that like poetry is a form of resistance against the machine. Because the AI doesn't have a body. Of course, you can get the AI to write poetry, but the AI doesn't feel. You can whatever, get it to pretend to feel. You can get it to do. But I like the idea that poetry is a kind of channeling of the outside. Generally, I try to channel. Well, I don't try and channel anything. You can't really force it. It's like the mood takes you, the spirit takes you. Like some words come in. Usually, I'm looking at the birds or the sky or like the car park outside, or something floats into your mind. And you're like, I have to write this down. And yeah, I don't know. So I think that poetry. So the relationship between poetry and philosophy is to do with the imaginative and a speculative dimension. So rather than the kind of philosophy is complicated because it deals with both the analytic and the logical, as well as I would say like the questions of metacognition and what it is to have a mind and so on. But I would say insofar as there is a link, it is to do with the speculative aspect of thought, which is not reducible to a program in that sense, right? So it's the non-mechanized aspects of our cognition qua human, which we can then theorize about.
But why is it any more? I published a book of poetry once, so I know. Don't read it.
They are 1,000 times more attractive.
It's the worst thing in the world. But but it was really really fun to write. That's for sure. You know who's another big poet is Yarvin, who
Yes, I know.
He likes crying while reading his poetry. That's his
I've seen him read his
favorite
poetry.
thing to do, which is great. No, but his poem's great, and hey, I think it's great to let the emotions out. I'm not criticizing, but I guess what I don't understand about what you're saying, why is the writing of poetry any different than the writing of like prose fiction or something?
Okay,
Like,
I mean, it's not necessarily in some ways, but I would say that there's a less. Well, I mean, okay, it's complicated. It's like defining a game or something, right? There are loads and loads of different types of games, but there are loads of different types of genre structures of writing. Like clearly, you can write a sonnet, a haiku, tango, whatever. There's all these different models of formal poetry, right? So you can have the form as a structure. Most people write kind of free verse prose poetry, which isn't very good. I necessarily, right? Like because they think it's spontaneous and natural. Like
yes, that's what I was doing. And so you mean it's just free.
Yeah, and
free
sometimes
flow.
that stuff can work. A lot of the time, it is somehow. It depends whether you think that writing in this way is a spontaneous expression of the soul, whether you think that the degree to which something is expressive or the degree to which you think something is structured. And there's a very complicated question about the relationship between the two, because clearly there's a choice, even insofar as one talks about channeling or something like this. The one is the passive vector of forces. Nevertheless, one decides, one edits, one pares down. So I spend a lot of time paring down poems. Right, I tend to write them as they are, but then if I do edit, then it would be to eliminate words. So I'm quite interested in like processes of reduction or paring down, rather than, I suppose, if you're describing something or conveying information, you would actually try to be sort of more or less complete. Like, here's an argument. Okay, this bit, this bit, this bit. So there is a kind of maybe difference in that sense of trying to condense or distill perhaps the essence or a kernel of a thought or an idea or an observation. It's a tricky thing to talk about.
I'm a huge Bukowski fan, and he's like the only poet. I mean, I like Wordsworth too, but Wordsworth, he has some cool stuff. And then also Dylan Thomas. But outside of that, I don't think I really like any poetry. But I love Bukowski, and I'll read all his poems all day. And the funny thing about Bukowski is if you read his early work before he sort of just became a homeless drunk for 10 years, it's really, really flowery. It's extremely ornate, and he's a genius. I mean, he's full power, letting it all out, every crazy word, and then over time he pares it down and down and down and down and down until he's writing the most simplistic, few words to say the most things. So I tend to agree that it's writing. Good writing is editing, right?
Yeah, to some extent. But then there's some beautiful Baroque poetry.
Yeah, sure.
And so yeah. I mean, as you say, I don't know. I in my naive boomerist defense, I'd say it's resistance to the forces of homogenization somehow, and there is a kind of mystical dimension to it. And
so we can write poetry to beat the machine. We can write poetry.
I know. I mean, this sounds like this sounds pathetic. I understand. I mean, if you told me at 15 that like 30 years later you're going to be trying to convince people that like writing a poem is a form of resistance, I would very rude. I would have stabbed you in the whatever.
They've been saying that since the 60s.
I know,
That's what.
and I feel this rising self-loathing as I say it, but I on the other hand, I do want to defend this sort of this type of thing insofar as like it's not for anything, right? The radical uselessness of things.
Yeah, right. There's
so I had this thought the other day. Really, what will be left of the human is our mistakes and our errors, the things that we cannot optimize for, basically miscommunication, our failings, our faults, our flaws, like the kind of cracks in our soul. Like this actually is maybe what it is to be human, because machines will always be optimized, if you see what I mean. Like there's no point in having a machine that is inefficient. Do you know what I mean? You're not going to program something with errors in it necessarily. You will find them and they will iron them out, right? So what is left of us? Like machines can beat us at lots of things now. That's fine, great. I mean, I do think we should just turn them all off and like live in a van, like your lady friend said. You know, like wife, sorry, or you.
It's fine. It's fine.
You know, like you know, there's a world in which like stroking an otter and you know, like going to sleep in a pelt, you know, is everything, right? Like who doesn't want that?
See, I would actually say the profoundness of AI to me is not has as little to do with the actual tech. It has to do with what it says about people. And put extremely simply, you know, as we said, we've reached this kind of total glut where there is definitely enough creative output out there.
Right.
And maybe at some level, all of this is about us being like, okay, as you said, we need a sifting mechanism, and a really reductive sifting mechanism is the person white, right?
Yeah.
Which is again, I do think that also comes again from the feminine sort of inability to identify talent without that. But again, that's a different discussion. But I would say that the machines do make mistakes. Like the machines are actually way less efficient.
Sure.
They're horrible. Think about a key, my car key to my friggin' Toyota. It stops working. What tech does so well is make you responsible for its mistakes, right? I now have to go and figure out how to get this battery replaced, do all this crap. It's easier for the machine. I've been enslaved to figure out its friggin' problems. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know.
Sure. Okay. I mean, I take this point, but in a sense that the ideal image of the tool is that the tool works. I mean, the tool is for something. The tool is useful. Ideally, the tool will break. The tool will not work, right? But its function is to do something. It has a purpose. The point would be something like the purposelessness of the human, or that in the human which resists use and reduction in this way, is what is the most human. Somehow.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like, right, by that definition, what would be like the most human thing to do? Like the most useless possible. This is kind of a Debord thing. Who does this? This is like a situationist thing, kind of like do something that's completely random. Like is that possible?
I think also like doing nothing, like modes of being like contemplation and passive modes of, you know, observation, acceptance, praying, so on, whatever. Like whether you think the praying is active or passive or whatever.
Yeah, maybe praying. That's maybe the most use, like by this definition. Yeah, listening. Right. Yeah, just like listening to the world. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm with you though, man. I'm so down for this like anti-tech revolution. Like I'm completely down. Like I'm ready to like go and be part of that. Because that's the real fight, I think. I mean, also, it sure is weird that the machines, how long did we say that, oh, the one thing machines will never be able to do is make art? And then it turns out like that's the one thing they can do. Like they can make a lot of
Yeah,
art. Like
having written at length about iconoclasm, you have to
yeah,
wonder if the iconoclast had a
we're
point.
right. Yeah, yeah, they right, exactly. That art was going to be like the tool of our oppression more than anything. God,
Right.
that's good. And they probably were right. That the Muslims, that's why they're going to win. Okay. Well, dude, thank you so much. This was amazing. Nina, you're awesome. You're great. We need more Nina Power in the world.
No, we
Where are
definitely
you
don't.
at? What are you doing? How are you surviving these days? Are you like is
Well,
everything okay from the the cancellations?
yes, I mean, I've decided to understand everything that happens to me as a combination of absurdity, a lesson, a spiritual, a trial, and just sort of deeply amusing. And this is a good combination of attitudes to have. I have to make enough money to survive, which is I've decided to also treat that as a sort of quest, like my quest, rent quest,
Like in a game, you mean?
Yeah,
Like a game. Yeah.
like I've gamified the financial part of my life. So I am engaging. I set up this editing thing called insensitivity
Oh
readers.
yeah, I saw that.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of cool. So people have been sending like poetry and short stories and stuff. It's actually very interesting and theory, philosophy stuff. So that's the thing. I have a Substack. Yeah, but to be honest, I don't care about money. Obviously, I need enough to pay my rent and bills, but I'm not very interested in that. I'm interested in like the quality of time that people spend with each other and with the world, and yeah, like questions of reflection and yeah, I don't know, theology, philosophy, so on.
Well, it's
Beauty.
great, and you have a poetry Substack,
I do.
right? People can subscribe to your poetry Substack
Yes,
and
yes,
give you
very
money
girly.
somehow. Okay. All right. Well, Nina, thank you so much. This was super interesting,
No, no
and
worries. Are there any
yeah.
other questions or insults that people wanted
Let's
to?
see. I think people were asking about your poetry. What else did they say? They are making lots of jokes, not mean ones, just like funny ones.
Somebody, I want to know. Tell me something funny.
Uh, they're talking about Nicole Kidman films.
Oh,
I
I didn't
can't.
see the what's it called, baby girl or baby doll.
Baby girl, yeah,
I haven't.
is that it? One person says anti-capitalist. Does that mean I have to pay for her? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
apparently
look,
so.
let's be clear. Like markets predate capitalism. Like I'm not, it's I'm not like how do I put it? I'm opposed to the kind of the homogenization. Like I think exchange reduces things and puts things on the market which shouldn't be on the market, right?
Well,
So
yeah.
I'm for limited markets. I'm not anti-capitalist in the sense that I think well, it's also kind of like we're in it, right? It's unavoidable. Like it's also a social technology. So I'm not against like entrepreneurialism or like people coming up with good ideas or whatever people think anti-capitalism is. I'm also not like in favor of redistribution in the kind of Soviet
Right.
power sense, right? For example, like they've tried to tax the farmers in the UK. Like I'm completely opposed to that. They're trying to take away kind of they're trying to use inheritance tax to dispossess people of their land. So
Wow.
what I mean by anti-capitalist, insofar as I say, is this romantic critique of the homogenizing and reductive tendencies of capital. I don't want I don't want capital in every relation. I want a minimal market in do you know what I mean? Like there are some things I think should not be commodified in that sense. Should not be
I
on
think
the
again we're on the exact same page. Really, I think it's like that's why anti-capitalist is going to scare people away because that's not
sure.
really what you mean. You're talking about yeah, like I mean, sure, turning health into a market was obviously a massive mistake, and even Adam Smith would have been against that. I mean, nobody should have ever done that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're saying that it's just the commodification of every relationship
Yeah.
is not good, and I
Right.
don't think. Yeah, I certainly
So in
agree.
that sense, like, I think Marx diagnoses that, you know what I mean? Like, and I was a Marxist in some sense, like 15 years ago, more strictly speaking. But I think Marx it sees what's happening. He sees what industrial capitalism is and what it's doing, you know, insofar as it's eroding these, you know, what he talks about in the Communist Manifesto, like eroding all these relationships, all of these traditions, all of these sort of, spiritual practices. Like it's destroying place and people and dislocating things in such a way, you know, all that is solid melts into air and things that people always quote. So there is a diagnosis there, which I think is correct. I don't think whatever people have done in the name of Marx is correct. I think
Right,
that's
because they're doing the same thing. They're also destroying the beauty.
Correct.
Okay, Nina, thank you so much. This was great. Please stay in touch, and this was awesome. I'll talk to you later.
Nice
I gotta go to a thing now. So,
Enjoy your thing.
bye.
Goodbye.
Peace.